I would like to warmly welcome our next speaker, Danny Phillips, who is the co-founder of Omneo. Danny is passionate about creating meaningful, mutually valuable and direct relationships between brands and their best customers, believing that brands are often investing too much on acquisition and advertising instead of retention and customer experience. Thank you for joining us, Danny. Welcome, and the stage is yours.
Thanks a lot, Krista. Thanks for having me. I'm dialing in all the way over from the other side in the world. I'm a co-founder of a product called Omneo. We're a clienteling, loyalty and customer experience platform for omnichannel retailers. And I'm currently dialing in from, if I can get this slides to work, from Torquay, Australia, which is on the other side of the planet. It's a hot summer day here. I'm not sure if this video will work, probably not. But I just wanted to show you, we had a beautiful sunset here tonight before I started the presentation. But anyway, I've got to catch up some time here, so I'll get stuck straight into it. My brand and my platform has worked with a couple of really well-known local Australian and international brands. Some of them you might know, Zimmerman trades internationally, Penfolds, a famous Australian wine, Magasin de Nord, which is a beautiful department store over in Denmark, and MJ Bale's just a local retailer here in Australia that sells menswear. We believe that traditional concepts of retail and customer service have largely been forgotten in the last 10, 15 years with respect to the way e-commerce was launched and the concept of e-commerce and how that relates to the in-store experience. So a lot of what we've done with Omneo and a lot of the things we've done more broadly in our work in the retail industry is to try to bring back some of those good old-fashioned retail concepts and just think about the role that staff and retail teams play in good customer experiences. I heard a quote the other day which really stuck with me, which is, if branding is a promise made, customer experience is a promise kept. I wish it was my quote, but I can't take credit for it. But I think that's a really good way of describing what I think customer experience is, which is the subjective experience of the customer as they see it from their eyes, not necessarily something that we put out there into the world as a brand. So first, I'd just like to talk a little bit about how I see e-commerce and in-store experience working together for a brand, because I think without getting that model right in our heads, it's very hard to engage our employees and deliver great EX or employee experience that matches up with the CX that we're trying to deliver, which can deliver new money in return for the brands that you might work for or represent. So often sometimes when you think about e-commerce, you either think of it as, if using my example here, it's like the biggest store. It's a store within a group of stores. It behaves a bit differently, but it's effectively a big store. Some people see e-commerce as a channel where you've got stores that behave one way and e-commerce behaves a different way, but it's sort of segregated from the main area. And this is where you'll have e-commerce managers and heads of digital, very separate to heads of retail, and working very differently with each other. And the growth of in-store and online being invested in. We're trying to grow our store network, maybe by opening more stores or making our stores more performant. Same for e-commerce. We're trying to make our e-commerce metrics better. But the way I like to look at it is more nuanced. I think the idea, and the way I like to think about it is, if you imagine e-commerce is a wrapper around every store. And it's also a component within every store. So the better your digital experiences are and the way you think about e-commerce and the role it plays in retailing and customer experience, as you improve it, it grows inside the store, which makes the store performance bigger. And as your stores perform better, they grow e-commerce because e-commerce is wrapped around it. It's no surprise that for brands, when people are still navigating the differences between their store networks and their e-commerce channels, that as they open more stores, e-commerce performance grew. But if they started closing stores because they thought e-commerce was taking over from stores, then e-commerce started shrinking, going, okay, so there's a correlation between the number of stores and the quality of those stores and the performance of e-commerce. So you can see how the interplay between these two things is probably a lot more congruent than what most people give it credit for. And that a lot of the strategies and a lot of the way we approach digital and technology and e-commerce and the way we approach retail experiences probably isn't as symbiotic as it should be. So what does this mean for us from an EX and CX point of view? So sort of stepping back to another concept here about how marketing teams or digital teams, what they're trying to get out of the technology and the work that they're doing, they're sort of out there to drive behavior. I hear this word a lot here in Australia. I'm not sure if it's similar over in Europe, but we want to drive behavior. We want to make someone do something that they wouldn't have done otherwise. While you're reading the newspaper, stop, put that down, come into my store or go to my website. While you're trying to watch a movie, while you're trying to watch a TV show, stop it and change behavior and come and shop. And then once you turn up to shop, then that's on you. We drove you to store, and that's what it's all about. And you'll see here that customer data or your CDPs give that drive system all the weaponry that it needs to be effective, but it's making a big assumption that the customer data exists and is of a high quality. And you only have to talk about first party and third party cookies and all this other stuff to realize that the fire hose of information we have about our customers, and I use the capital C customer there, is limited at best and probably hard to trust. So let's put that to one side for a second, and then think about what I like to call, and also too, this is help me sell. I'm a brand, I want you to help me sell. I'm thinking more about the other side of the equation, which is I'm in your store. I've come to your website potentially. I've come to your store. I'm here now. You won. The behavior was driven. Now are you going to help me shop? And we think that this side of the equation is the bit where a lot of things are left to chance. Either the customer does all the work, as some of your earlier speakers have talked about, or any work that you do gets thrown in the bin and you have to start again tomorrow. So there's no pickup where you left off between stores and online, which I'll talk a bit more about in a second. So the idea here is that in store, you want enabled experiences where staff, customers can make sure that any time that they spend in store is creating value. So if I'm trying something on, if you're an apparel retailer, that we save what you tried on. What did I like? What didn't I like? What sorts of things am I interested in? What aren't I interested in? I've spent 20 minutes in a store. It'd be nice to have a receipt of that work that I've done, even if I choose not to buy something, so that if I do choose to buy something later, I can pick up where I left off. So the good thing about this side of the equation is if you get it right, and a lot of this is about CX and EX and the tools and the techniques and the culture you bring to your brands, the happy byproduct is you get quality customer data because the customers are willing participants in giving you their data. I sort of use the concept zero-party data as opposed to first-party data. First-party data is data that you own about the customer. Zero-party data is data the customer has given you knowingly and willingly. It's their data that they're sharing with you to help them shop, as opposed to first-party data, which is data you've snuck out of the customer that you own as a brand that you can then weaponize to drive their behavior. So I'm not saying driving is not important. I'm sure there's a whole marketing conference you could go to where they'll talk at depth about how clever and personalized and how AI is going to weaponize all this data. It's great. It's a great byproduct. But I think the CX side, the enable, the help me shop, is more valuable and more interesting and probably more appealing to the people that are at this conference. And the good thing is it's a cumulative play. The more time you spend on this enable side, this is a compounding interest of data and experiences that will build over time. Whereas on the drive side, unless you're buying the traffic dries up. So you really need to keep paying to play on that right-hand side of the diagram. Okay, so next concept, omnichannel value. So I think in-store and online, there are some fairly universal truths about the amount of traffic we can drive to a site and what percentage of that traffic will convert today. So online, if you're an omnichannel retail brand, it might be between 1% and 5% is the best you could hope for. Half of that traffic might be bots, but the stuff that converts, we're hoping are humans. And you're investing a whole lot of time, money, and effort in your conversion rate optimization to make that 2% go to 2.2% or to 2.5%. Wouldn't that be great? In store, similar experience. You've got lots of people, you've got lots of footfall coming through your store. You're converting 15, 20% of that footfall into someone who purchases today. The rest, they spend time in there, but they leave, and it's gone. What I'm suggesting is that the value is, rather than spending time trying to optimize those conversion rates, because there is a law of diminishing returns in the work that you do there, that the real opportunity is leveraging the just browsing crowd. how can we make sure that the work that they do online and in store follows them to the next part of their experience? And I've seen sort of no shortage of customer journey diagrams and maps there, but how much are you helping the customer transition from one step in that journey to the next? How much of their work and their information is available to them, or is it only available to you as the brand or the marketer? There's a lot of talk, especially in CRM or customer data world, around a single view of customer, and that's great. So all the people inside the brand can have one view of a customer or customers, but I like to think of it more about how do we create a single view of brand for each customer? How can they have a consistent and connected experience as they move between online and in-store and back again? So that's something where I think the size of the prize is a lot bigger in those chunks that you see on the diagram there than the conversion rate optimization, which I'm sure most brands have already spent a lot of money trying to optimize. And there's probably not much left they can eke out of that little thin sliver of optimization there. Okay, so then what does this mean for employees, and what does it mean for customers, and how do you tie these two things together? So I think one thing that is true when it comes to reporting and attribution and performance and all this sort of stuff, generally the computer gets the sale. So if I use this point of sale computer, then it processes the sale. If the e-commerce engine processes the sale, then it gets the attribution. Or maybe the ad you clicked before you arrived at the e-commerce site will get the sale. It helps justify the investments in the technology. So when you're buying new computers, you're justifying the cost of that by the value that return, but it removes the value of the human interaction, and it focuses a lot when I'm looking at these sorts of reports. It focuses on what products were sold together, what was the conversion rate, what was the acquisition rate. It's really focusing a lot more on the transactional nature of retail, which is important. That's what we're in market for, but it really takes a lot of the humans out of it, and it makes a lot of the work that our retail teams do in store not really recognized. And I think that's the thing that we want to change. So when we look at the other side of the equation and talk about the staff and the store team, the staff and the store that is responsible for the customer should get the value of the sale, or also get the value of the sale. You'll notice that in the middle I've said it's not a zero-sum game. So one example I've seen out there is one of our brands, they have two reports. When they turn on their computer in the morning at 9 a.m., one report says your computer has done $0 of sales, because that makes sense, because the doors aren't open yet and they can't process any. But the other report says you've done $15,000 worth of sales since you turned the computer off last night, because your customers have turned up at an airport store or in another country, or they've jumped online and bought something. So you, the staff member, and your store team have generated $15,000 worth of sales while you were sleeping, because of the work you did yesterday, the day before, last week, last month, last year. And the more work you do today, now that you've turned on your computer, yes, you might be able to generate $5,000 worth of sales through this cash register, but any other work you do might make sure that tonight's sales and tomorrow's sales are increased because of the work you do with these customers, because you will also share in that work. Now, a lot of brands will say, yeah, but what about if I go and shop at a different store? Who gets the sale? And I'll say, well, you both do. The store that the customer's attached to originally, maybe through acquisition or where they mainly get their service from, and the store that processed the sale, the computer that got it. It doesn't have to be one or the other, one winner, one loser. You can both win. And it really changes the conversation from a staff incentive point of view, because they turn up and go, not only did my store generate $15,000 overnight, but myself as a staff member, I've got 1,322 customers that are mine. So if I'm going to leave this brand and go work for a competitor, I'm leaving 1,322 customers that will be reallocated to the next best staff member in my store. And if I want to come back, I have to start from zero. So all these loss aversion biases that some of our psychologists were talking about before, they can kick in for staff as well and are really important. Okay. So this was, I threw this slide in at the last minute because of what Stephen said earlier, that this whole idea of when brands say, yes, I hear about your good customer experiences, but most customers won't do that. Most customers won't care. Most customers, this bottom 50% in number, generate a very, very small portion of your revenue. So you need to over-index your experiences to that top group, the best customers, the top 10%, whatever. It's 80-20 rule. A small number of your customers will generate the most amount of value for your brands today, tomorrow, and ongoing. So make sure that you over-index your customer experiences to suit them. Okay. Last few things. Here are a few of the things to think about with respect to CX and retention versus acquisition. Most people think that successful retailing ends at a conversion, that once I've converted you, then the work we did to get you in, to grab your attention, get you into store and buy something, the end. And that's where that sort of line is there, the bottom line. The top line is, whereas I'm saying that it starts at that conversion. Today's transaction is the start of the next transaction. And what you do today as a store member, what data you save on behalf of the customer, what you follow up with that customer, either in an automated way, personalized way, or a manual way, will increase the chances of that customer choosing to shop with you and shop with you earlier and shop with you more often and advocate to the people that they influence. And that organic growth, that compounding growth that I was talking about becomes more possible. So I see customer experience is about making the transaction the start of the conversion, not the end. It's the start of the next transaction. So it's just a different way to think about that. Okay. So what KPIs matter here? There's been a lot of talk about measurements and those sorts of things. The ones that I think stand out the most, customer value, so giving your staff and your store teams the value generated by my customers for a particular period, whether it be a week, a month, a day, it's up to you. CSAT is very important. I like building CSAT measurement into all of our transaction receipts and interaction receipts, but split it by my customers. So are my customers overall being more satisfied or less satisfied? How does my store team compare to another store team in another state or another country that for all intents and purposes is similar, but is a different type of brand? And then annual average value from your customers in general and the retention rate. How many customers that you serve in 1 year are you getting back in the next year? So they're the KPIs that matter. There's plenty more than that, but these are the ones that I think retail teams, employees should be looking at and incentivized for. That's it from me. If you want to get in touch, my details are up there, screen grab if you want, or they'll be shared out later in the presentation. And if you've got any questions, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'd love to help.
Thank you, Danny. Thank you for sharing all these interesting insights. Fantastic. And thank you for joining us from Australia. We have a significant time difference in our zones. Have a nice evening there.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Bye-bye, Danny. Thank you very much.